Okay, we are a little pressed for time, so we're going to shorten this. So I'm going to do the intros, and I'm going to go super fast. So Kaggle Grandmaster panel. We've done these at just about every conference, even before there was a Grandmaster title. So we all have the Grandmaster title, including myself, but I'm going to narrate today. So we have Brandon, Kim, John, and Dimitri to go super fast. So in the first question, I'll let them introduce themselves and ask a question of what type of competitions you prefer, and just kind of tell everyone about a little bit of your Kaggle story. So Brandon?
My name is Brandon. I've been at H2O for about 6 years now as a data scientist. And I've been doing Kaggle for about 7 years or 8 years, I think. And that's actually how Mark found me, through Kaggle. That's how I got H2O. My favorite type of competition, I just like tabular competitions in general, which are rare nowadays, but I much prefer those.
Kim?
I'm Kim. I have a PhD in applied mathematics, and I'm a competitions grandmaster. I've been at H2O for 3.5 years now. Probably my favorite competition is tabular competitions, where there's some kind of interesting feature engineering that's possible.
John's a double Grandmaster. So.
Yeah, hi, John, and I'm best known at Kaggle for my analytics competition work. And so analytics competitions are a little different. They're a little more open-ended, graded subjectively. And so the first one I did was for the NFL, and they were looking to reduce concussions. And so I made a recommendation that they prohibit the blindside block under certain circumstances. So I did a model and analysis, and they ended up taking my information and using it to convince the owners for a rule change in 2019.
Dimitri also has an NFL story.
Yeah, I do. Hi, everyone. My name is Dimitri. I'm based in Europe. I'm a Kaggle competition grandmaster, and I'm with H2O for 2.5 years by now. I also have a success story with NFL. I won the first NFL competition on Kaggle. It was about the game itself, and we presented together with my teammate, who's also a Kaggle Grandmaster with H2O right now. We presented it in Indianapolis back in 2020.
Cool. Start off with, what's your favorite Kaggle battle story? None.
So this isn't really my story, but I did like when we had the one tabular competition that was the biggest competition. I don't even remember what it was, but one of our former employees at H2O, Bojan, he orchestrated the team that ended up winning the whole thing. What I liked about it was that a lot of times teams just kind of come together, ad hoc, but from the very beginning he designed a team to have very different skill sets. So he wanted a very disciplined coder, he wanted someone who was good at C++, he wanted someone who's really good at modeling, someone at ensembling, and yeah, they ended up winning out of like 7,000 participants. So it was fun to watch.
Anybody else got a favorite story of just middle competition or anything like that?
Some more recent ones. The last 3 years, we've had a H2O team in the Women in Data Science competitions, and I got to work with some other colleagues at H2O, Aaron and Lauren and Parole, and we ended up coming in 6th, and then 1st, and then 2nd in the Women in Data Science competition out of about 800 people, and it was fun to get to work with some other women and we were one of the few teams that had an all-female group. So we were proud of our performance in the competition.
Yeah, I have a least favorite battle story.
That works.
It's not a favorite. It was probably 4 or 5 years ago now. There was a competition. I was doing really well. I think I was in 5th. I was constantly around 5th until like 3 days after the competition. And it was Labor Day weekend, so it was a long weekend. And I think I was busy or something, so I wasn't going to be able to do any coding or fix anything like that. And the Friday before, it was ending on Monday, the Friday before, someone released very high-scoring code. I think the code got like 2nd place or something like that before everyone else started using the same code. So I just tumbled down the leaderboard to like 50th or something, or I don't even know what I ended up at. But yeah, that just was my least favorite battle story, I guess.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure on these. I'm going to go off script already. So something that I found interesting being up on some of these panels that maybe you guys don't realize is how much time goes into some of these. So I'm going to ask that question, maybe starting with Dimitri. how much time would you estimate you put into a competition, let's say, where you're striving for a certain goal?
Yeah, it becomes a second full-time job, definitely. So even some competition hosts, they ask to assess how many hours you've spent, and this is kind of a second full-time job for a month or two. So you're counting hundreds of hours worth of work you did, and it's it's crazy when you see these numbers.
John, kind of same question.
Yeah, for the analytics challenges, I will typically just do a little bit here and there over the course of, say, the first 4 weeks. But then during the last 4 weeks, I start stepping it up. And I would say during the last 2, it's what I do almost full time. And in fact, I took a week off from BSMH last week so I could work full time for 7 days straight on the equine performance and safety competition.
Yeah, it's at least a half-time job. It's fairly time-consuming, probably 20 hours a week if I'm working seriously on a competition.
Yeah, when I first started, yeah, I'd put in a lot of hours, probably like not 80 hours, 40 hours, yeah, another full-time job a week or something like that. But nowadays, I'm real lazy, so I just kind of...
Yeah, and it sounds scary. I mean, that's what you're up against. You know, people putting a lot of time in it, and it's hard. And I think there's 2 ways to see that. Like, you usually can't assume a bad performance of anybody is because they're not very good at it. It's just evolved, especially with the crowdsourcing if you got in early. But yeah, there's a lot of different strategies, but there's a lot of time in here. So I think someone at the Sydney panel said, you know, this is how you get those. They use 5,000. I heard the 10,000 from Malcolm Gladwell, but you know, that's how you get that kind of experience. So it's pretty interesting. Slido yet. So what's the simplest hack you've done to win or achieve a medal or a goal that you have? Something simple that maybe people didn't expect.
I think the simplest thing I've done is one of the first competitions I probably medaled in is the BNP competition, which is target encoding categorical variables. So like if you have a column of categoricals for each category, you calculate the mean target over the entire data set and then use that as your feature. You don't do that exactly because it will overfit a lot, but there's ways to kind of counteract that. But that was probably the simplest thing I've done I think I got gold on that one.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a simplest method. It's always quite a bit of work, just trying different things to find a good model. Probably the hackiest thing is sometimes the organizers have tried to anonymize their data, and it's possible to kind of decode the anonymization. So I can think of a couple of times where it became more of a game of trying to decode what the organizers had done to anonymize their data. So that's the biggest hack.
Mine is probably for an optimization competition from last Christmas. So every year, Kaggle does an optimization competition and has to do with Santa Claus and the elves. And this was all about sequencing movies for the elves to watch in the fewest possible turns. And so the hack was that I discovered a pattern in this, it's called a super permutation. And so when you lay out this super permutation that's like 256 characters long or more, you can pick up a pattern. And so once I did that, I was able to elevate my my score. But it wasn't an easy hack. Like you have to put the work in, and I spent a lot of time staring at those numbers before I picked it up.
Mine was probably Los Alamos National Laboratory. The task was to predict when a laboratory earthquake is going to happen. So they have a specific device where which they use to simulate an earthquake with like small rock, and they record an audio sound. We had a set of recordings for training and a set of recording for tests, and people generated thousands, tens of thousands of variables out of these sounds with different algorithms. Our team generated 4 variables, and that was enough, because the trick we did, we looked at the sound of the test data, so what we need to apply to, and we dropped part of the training data, which doesn't seem to be represented in test. So we kind of just overfitted to test data, and that worked for us.
I know that one. I remember. It's funny because my takeaway is almost the opposite. Like, there were some really cool notebooks that got shared about all sorts of moving averages, and it was giant, bigger and bigger and bigger Python, like pandas kind of aggregations you can do, but then 4 was good enough. So.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, to some extent, reverse engineering a little bit in here, and that's something that happens as well. And so a worse variant of that is leakage. So any just thoughts on leakage, how painful that is? Do you know, how despise it, a lot of these? Because a lot of times it can be a competition you're running, like kind of like Brendan says, it's a different form of leakage, but someone will reverse engineer something really important, and people have different takes on it. So I'm curious if any of you guys particularly hate it. Brandon's shared some before, so that's like the most noble way to do it. So,
Yeah, I like finding it. It's fun.
yeah. Does anyone else enjoy leak finding? Because I do too, so I'm on Brandon's side with this, although I'm not good enough to share it. So.
I'm a fan of finding leaks if I can.
Yeah. I have a good question coming in already. So how are you able to improve your skills from beginner to Grandmaster?
I mean, mostly reading the forums and reading other people's code. I think that's probably the biggest thing you can do. Just spending a lot of time doing that and learning from their tips and tricks that people share, and just like maintaining that and using it in future competitions. Because you can always find stuff that someone applied to some other competition that you can reapply to the current one. So yeah, it's just about building up those. That stuff, yeah.
For me, oh, sorry,
go ahead.
go ahead.
You can go.
For me, it's first of all about failing fast, because you never know upfront what's going to work best, what's going to be the winning idea, and very frequently you end up doing completely different thing from what you thought you will do in this competition, which can be frustrating. But like mastering the skill of failing fast was very important, because you try and you try and you try, and most of your ideas are failing. But if you're efficient in that, then you can basically use your time better. And that was one of the most important things for me.
Kim?
Yeah, mainly practice, just reading up on the areas of application is a good idea, just to make sure you understand the data sets, and yeah, just lots of practice getting an idea of what works for different data sets and reading up on how different models work.
So
Mark, I just want to kind of, if folks aren't familiar with Slido and you're seeing the questions pop up, so you could just QR code, and then you can enter your question there.
I'm just going to read from the script you guys can see. So we'll take that top one. So how does your alignment of your CV to Kaggle's CV look like, and maybe in general? I mean, it's going to be different for a lot of competitions, and people often will post something that shows, people are all kind of checking that out usually in a competition especially, but how do you guys take that one? Or how do you approach it as well?
I mean, in general, like, for example, the competition I'm doing right now is like about predicting if there's a gravitational wave in a bunch of a noise image, basically. And in that competition, a lot of people are reporting that their CV scores are like 0.8 AUC, and the leaderboard scores are more along about 0.7. So there's a 0.1 difference between them. But what's important, really, most of the time, is that when your CV score, your local CV score improves by 0.01, then you'd hope that your leaderboard also improves by 0.01. So you want to try to keep it consistent. Once you start seeing weird things happen, then you start asking other questions about why, or try to figure out why.
We also have a take on that one.
Yeah, it's about correlation. So you need to make sure that what you measure on your CV correlates with the leaderboard in Kaggle. In one of the recent competitions, like I did 2 probe submissions, and there was a correlation. It was negative, though. And then I spent a few hours trying to figure out what's wrong. And as soon as you fix that, then you can trust your CV, and then you can proceed faster without even looking at test data. So you just trust that it's positively correlated, and that would allow you to try more and more.
Yeah, I find it's kind of interesting that, if you do exactly what Dmitry said, you don't really need Kaggle's leaderboard. You don't need to do all the gamification and submit 200 times, but different people have different takes on that. So someone with 10 submissions is not necessarily brilliant. They just trusted their CV for a long time and continually checked where they're at. So how'd you know data science was for you? Right. Takers?
I'd say for me, I've always liked numbers and do statistics and machine learning and such. I actually my career path went in a different direction at one point, and I was doing a lot of consulting and a lot of general operations work. And then at some point, I realized that I'm a numbers guy, and I'd rather do more Excel and code than PowerPoint. So I got back to it, and it's just been a great fit. And so having done one thing and then the other, I'm sure this is what I like to do.
The bottom one's going to be an answer kind of like how much time you put into it. So what kind of local computing resources would be helpful to become more efficient? And there's probably, just from the top, 2 categories of this. There's tabular and there's deep learning. So anybody want to take, if not that question, or what you kind of commonly use?
Yeah, so I guess locally now, over the years, I've kind of accumulated GPUs, I guess. So I have one machine with 2 1080, and then I have another machine with 2 2080s. I never got a machine with 3080s yet. I'm gonna wait for the 4080s maybe. But yeah, I just have 2 machines with 2 GPUs each, and both have a lot of RAM. I think they have like 128 or 256 gigabytes of RAM, or I just have a lot of swap space to basically use fake RAM, use my drives as fake RAM, I guess, so in case I go overboard on something, but yeah.
Well, when I started on Kaggle 11 years ago, it was possible to do the competitions just on a standard laptop. Yeah, at this point, I try to start out with a modest-sized machine if the data set's not too large. So it might be 32 gigabytes, and then at the end, I might rent some larger machines if I really need to crank through the final averaging and final models. But I try not to use resources that are too extensive.
Yeah, and I have a very modest system at home that I use. It's got 24 gig of RAM and an older 1060 graphics card in it, but I do similar to what Kim's saying. If I do need more compute, I'll go on AWS and use whatever they call their secondary rental, the secondary market on-demand type thing, and it's pretty affordable, I found.
I'll add 2 small things. So one, like I started with a 3 gig RAM laptop and did pretty well in some competitions with just that. But Kaggle actually offers really good resources. So if these answers scare you, and they might not, but Kaggle offers GPUs. They offer pretty good systems you can keep up with. So 2 minutes left. So how do you keep up with current research in the field? And do you? I would say, admittedly, I kind of don't. I follow Kaggle. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I usually consider that by following Kaggle, I follow the current research, because people try out new methods, and whenever something works, usually someone posts it on the forums, so you learn from the forums, you learn from the solutions. But it's probably, I agree, probably it's not following the research, right?
I mean, there's a lot of really cool neural net architectures that come out on Kaggle, and then you see them battle tested, essentially. They come out of the papers, and you get to see them work live. Working code, often, really good resource in Kaggle. Anybody else? Opinion, yes, no on research?
Same.
Yeah, Kaggle's good as far as practical advice about what people are using to get state-of-the-art results. I also like to look at archive, which is kind of crazy in machine learning. You'll see 100 papers getting posted every day, but I do my best to keep up on things like explainability related to what I'm doing.
Like Brendan started with reading the forums. There's usually these days they incentivize that, so there's a lot of people who will immediately attack a competition and put forum posts of all the related research that they can find. So you can really just keep following Kaggle even to study some of the research. Old competitions, just the sharing has really gotten very useful in Kaggle. So, got 30 seconds. Okay, would you use driverless AI as a first quick approach? Missed the problem, but yeah, would you start with driverless AI, see where it's at, to a Kaggle problem, tabular style?
Yeah, I do it all the time, especially to figure out, that way I don't have to because it do all the feature engineering for you pretty much. So it's just, run the data set through driverless, see what features it comes up with, and then, the good ones I'll code up myself, so, they're submittable with their competition. But yeah, just a good way to filter out what some things that work in the beginning.
Yeah, it's good as far as understanding what kind of interactions are going on between features. It'll automatically find some feature combinations that you might not have thought of. So.
Yeah, I've recently started doing that also. It is helpful.
It is helpful sometimes to find some leakage between train and test, or maybe to explore how test and train were split, because that gives you variables, explanations, so that might be helpful.
Cool. A lot more good questions, but you can usually find us. We're a friendly bunch, so ask us some questions if you can find us out in the hall. So we'll try to stop there. Thanks, everybody.